Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, the bench press leg drive. All right, guys, before we get into this topic, if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. So, it's not everybody's favorite topic, but it's nice to talk about leg drive. We can get some good banter going and stir up some conversation and likely bring some hate. I'm joined by Mark Estrabio, who is absolutely one of the weakest strong people you'll ever know. I'm saying that tongue in cheek because last time Mark was on here, Mark is a strength and strongman coach and just kind of a good looking Superman Clark Kent type of guy from the Philippines. But anyway, last time I had him on, I said, "What are you having this guy on for? He's weak as shit. Weak as shit." So before we start talking about bench press and before the triggered masses think you're weak as shit, Mark, please tell us just what your top bench is and what your top deadlift is.
Absolutely. So my top bench is three plates of 315. I hit that just recently. And then it was actually just this past Monday, I hit a 615 conventional deadlift. And I'd like to add that was with hook grip.
So yeah, you have a 600 plus pound deadlift, 300 plus pound bench, and you're strong. We've established that. So let's get on. And if people want to drop hate comments after that, they can. So I want to talk about leg drive on the bench press. Been around this game a long time, and I think you got around into internet lifting around 2013. We saw kind of an invasion of the powerlifting strength training world where it kind of infiltrated. I'm not going to say specifically muscle building, but the average lifter, right? The average lifter out there just trying to look better, maybe build up a little bit better bench strength, respectable bench strength. All of a sudden, they're inundated with all of these powerlifting techniques and ideas and concepts. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of pressure to do things like leg drive. So, Mark, I want to open the conversation by saying just a general question for general base building training, like somebody that's out there that does want to build a 315-pound bench. Do they need to do leg drive on every rep of every training set?
No. So how I look at leg drive in the bench press, again, I want to contextualize. I am talking specifically about your general developmental bench press. So probably more touch and go, not bounce, touch and go. I think the leg drive in that application, what that's good for is helping you time your stroke. And for me, what it helps me do is it helps me think about pushing myself into the bench to lock in my upper back for a more stable position. The powerlifting style, arched, wide grip, heaving leg drive style bench press, that's great for demonstrating 1 RM strength. But for those of us who are trying to build a wider base, build muscle, and then build to a higher peak, I don't think leg drive is strictly necessary. And I think it can actually be very much a negative because you focus so much on the skill of the leg drive that you're not just plain developing the strength of bench press for reps.
I am very big on base building where we just focus on controlling the way down, kissing the t-shirt or, whatever, and then
Yeah.
pressing back up. I find for most people that I see trying to do leg drive is that it actually makes the set harder in a negative way. It becomes almost like a distraction or almost a primary focal point. And I was kind of glad to see the Larson press make an infiltration into the community psyche or mindset or whatever, because we go back to benching without any leg drive a little bit. But I'm not going to get into yet that most people are doing leg drive incorrectly. I will say during a bench set, if you're set up just properly, and you're focused on controlling the weight down, how many times during a set like that have you gotten like a lat cramp? It's hard. Would you say, Marcus, it's hard enough to sustain just a quality working set, keeping that torso tightness? That's hard enough. Would you say that's accurate? Maintaining
Absolutely.
that for the
Yeah.
course of the set?
I would say so, especially, it's kind of one of those things. It's like the bottom of your squat, the bottom of your bench, the bottom of your deadlift. It's an uncomfortable position because you have so much tension generated throughout the whole body. And when it comes to that eccentric phase of the bench press and the control in the upper body, the cue that I like is, you talk about kissing the t-shirt. One that I've used is don't break the tile. I think about my chest plate here being made out of kitchen tile. So, if I don't blink, it's not going to be so fragile that if I blink too hard, it breaks. But at the same time, if I try to bounce it, I'm going to crack the tile. And what I find is with a lot of more novice to early intermediate lifters who are focusing on leg drive, they come down so fast because they're not focused on tension up there, but only on creating that slingshot and heaving bounce with their legs as the bar crashes into their sternum.
So I want to make clear we're not obsessing about time under tension, and we're not, going down some weird rabbit trail. But when you are benching, if you're not controlling the weight down, you're losing your tightness. You probably, I would argue in that case, you're losing more off your ability to drive it off your chest than you would think. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. I'm really big on eccentric control in general for lifting. Controversially, I even promote it heavily on the deadlift. But what I have found is when you do slow down your eccentrics just a hair, we're talking maybe half a Mississippi, if that. What that allows you to do is sort of coil the spring. You're going to get a better stretch reflex through the reps, and the reps are going to look more consistent as a result of that. Whereas if you're just essentially letting gravity do the work coming down and then hoping to throw it back up on the other side of it, you're almost doing an ugly dead bench every single rep. Whereas with that control, it's just like when you jump, if you wind down and then pop into the jump versus quick jump, you'll be able to load the muscles better. And that also helps you just clean up your bar path as well. So just for me, from top to bottom, eccentric control is a great way to improve your lifting mechanics.
So one of the things I teach people, one of the things I've been known to say is we want to kind of load the spring. On
Yeah.
bench press or on other lifts for that matter, you want to kind of load the spring, and that can be kind of a difficult concept to understand. But if you have a spring, the more weight you press on it, you're kind of loading it or priming it. People used to make fun of me with how slow my bench press eccentrics were. Literally make fun of me. I have a video on here where I'm doing 500 with chains and a slingshot, and it seems to take 4 or 5 seconds. But the pop off my chest is immense, and that's what I try to teach people: is that control is not something to fear. That tension actually helps you press off your chest. So, Mark, I want to ask you. Let's kind of take this in a different direction. Leg drive can sometimes be viewed as something that's completely game changing.
Mhm.
And a lot of this is theoretical. Technique aside, how much do you really think on a 1 rep max that leg drive is adding to your 1 rep max?
So, personally, not as much as people want to think it does. I'd wager the leg drive itself is maybe only adding 5 to 10 pounds. I would say the big benefit of leg drive in a 1 rep max style bench press is what it's helping you do is get your timing down with the reversal of the press, as well as pushing you into the bench, which helps you maintain the arch.
Now, I'm going to say, just from my experience in watching the average individual do it, that it adds maybe nothing. That's just my opinion, because I don't think anybody's doing it really correctly. It's like the RDL. A lot of people are doing it, but I don't think they're doing it correctly. I've been on the platform with a lot of the really, some of the strongest lifters in the world, and when done right, I can see it giving that transference that you want. And from there, it could add 5 pounds, it could add
Yeah.
2 pounds, it could add 3 pounds. It could make the difference between a fast start off the chest and a faster start off the chest.
Mhm.
So I would say it's fair to say, even for top level lifters, that it might make a difference in that lockout. Might make a 5 pound difference, but for the average lifter, the value you're going to get out of it compared to the energy expenditure and distraction just makes it not worth it. That's my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think something worth noting too, as we talk about this, is with that leg drive in the bench. It needs to be a horizontal leg drive rather than a vertical leg drive. And if you are making it a horizontal leg drive, I could make the argument that even if it's not an actual physical response, mentally, because you're thinking horizontal, that could potentially help you keep the bar stacked. Where you're pressing up and back as opposed to straight up for cleaning up the bar path.
Okay, so let's build a foundation of a good bench press.
Excellent.
I'm gonna basically show you how I teach a basic simple setup, and then I want you to explain how you teach a
Mhm.
basic simple setup. And likely they'll just be different flavors of the same, different variations of the same ice cream flavor. So basically, I don't want people to get overly tight. We have their lats or their upper back, and we have your hips. So basically, I teach to mentally think about pushing your hips towards your lats. Now, you can have your lats packed, but I mentally have people think about pushing their hips towards their back. So this is going to create maybe a baby arch, but it's going to
Mhm.
create a bridge of tightness in the upper body.
Pretty
So you
natural.
have that base. That's kind of the base. And then from there, we can discuss how to work out leg drive. But how would how do you teach basic working tightness for the average bencher?
Yeah. So I start from the ground up with it because I think one of the most common errors I see just in the commercial gym when people bench is their feet. Their feet are really, their lower body is very flaccid. Their feet slide out from underneath them. They're just they're doing almost a Larson press, except their feet are still on the ground, if that makes
Right.
sense. So what I'll have my lifters do is I have them sit down on the bench and put their upper back against the bar in the rack. And I tell them, move your feet around, try to do a knee extension with your feet on the floor. Find a position where you feel like you get good tension in your quads. For some people, that's feet slightly forward the knee. For some, that's slightly behind, a little wider, a little narrower. Doesn't matter too much. And then from there, I think, all right, lock your feet down there, slide forward. That way, with keeping their feet where they're at. And then they just come underneath the bar. And what that does, I find, is it creates a good, strong, stable lower body position. And then because they didn't move their feet as they rolled forward the bench and brought themselves underneath the bar, it creates that powerful arch as well. And then because it's a very tight position, upper back is locked in. So then once they're there, mouth or so underneath the bar, scrape the paint off the rack, and then do a pull over to come out. And what I found is because they're already tight in the lower body, that position forces them to be tight in the upper body because now they're actively using their quads to push themselves into the bench.
Now you mentioned a big point, and this is something I want the average bencher that's watching to pay attention to on their bench videos. Watch what your feet do, because a lot of times I will watch somebody do, they'll grab the bar, they'll swing under the bar, they'll come up, they'll get the arch, they'll get the hip set, and then their feet are doing some kind of a Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. tapping extravaganza. That's probably that probably dates me a lot, but watch your feet, because if you get your upper body set and your feet are still dancing around, personally, it's driving me crazy because I want you to get settled, and you're not in a good position to press. Me and Mark approach things basically the same, just with different language and lingo and stuff like that. But I teach you got to get your feet set before you are pushing your torso, because if not, you're going to start wiggling your feet around trying to find a good leverage position for your feet, and that's likely going to jack up your your torso tightness. So just watch the feet.
I mean,
Make
you
sure
see
they're not dancing.
You see, so yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Is I've talked about is people tap dance when they're setting up. They're always shifting their feet around, and it's one of those things. I'm like, no, you. That's why I like starting with that cue of upper back into the bar, and just find a place where you can really lock your legs into the floor with that kind of knee extension cue, because it staples the feet down. So then, if you are using, quote unquote leg drive, what's really happening is you're just locking in the quads, which in turn helps get the glutes locked in, which helps create stability in the midline. So it creates full system rigidity starting from the floor.
So one thing I'd like to add before we get into actual leg drive mechanics is that when we talk about tightness, like upper body torso tightness, leg tightness, I don't personally believe it has to be something so intense that it steals all your focus. I think you
Mhm.
can have a minimal degree of tightness, a minimal degree of tightness on the legs. By minimal, I'm not saying understated or weak or loose. I'm saying you don't have to clench so hard that it becomes the primary focus of your press. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, you're not looking to turn this into, an isometric knee extension wall pressing, obviously. But we just want I guess, how do we put this? We want there to be enough tension that you can focus on moving the weight rather than stabilizing yourself. It's just one less thing to think about while you deal with the bar.
Enough tension to stabilize, remain tight throughout a set, not so much that you're like that it's impossible to maintain, because a lot of these setups are simply impossible to maintain through a 6, 8, 10, even 12 rep set.
Oh,
uh,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's just it. Your 1RM technique and your form, your stroke, it's going to look different from your base building higher rep work. It's kind of like trying to use a wide stance low bar squat for a set of 20 rep squats. Good luck.
so now that we have you set up, now that we have your torso set up and your legs set up, and let's talk about what you mentioned earlier, how to actually perform leg drive. So
Mhm.
many people, what they'll do is they'll push down and the butt will fly up. Now, the butt flying up, many people will come to me and say, my set didn't count because my butt left the bench. Like, we're not powerlifting, we're base building, we're muscle building. Don't worry about your butt coming up. Worry about control and getting as many reps as you can. With that said, if you are doing leg drive, if you're pushing down, that's likely contributing to your butt coming up, as opposed to pushing to transfer the weight towards your torso so you're actually getting something out of it. Mark, can you kind of comb through that a little bit and explain what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what'll happen is when people do initiate leg drive, it almost becomes a situation where it's hip drive because they're thrusting their hips up a little bit while flexing their quads. Whereas when I think of, leg drive applied correctly, that's why I like that knee extension cue is because what I'm doing is I'm having them flex their quads, which if their feet weren't stable to the floor would cause their feet to kick forwards, right? But because their feet are locked in, we think this is our lifter, their quads flex, it would ostensibly push them back. I mean, it won't if their upper back is tight enough. But the idea there is it pushes them into the bench and it creates horizontal tension. So we flex the quads, squeeze the glutes, lock in the core. All that's doing is it's helping your body remain more stable during the reversal phase of the bench press. And then again, mentally, it cues you're pushing everything back towards the rack rather than pushing everything up.
Right, that's a big differentiator and something you have to watch on your videos. Are you transferring the weight up or are you pushing everything towards the rack? Because your shoulders are kind of, if we're talking about kind of a kinetic chain, if you're pushing things back towards your shoulders or back towards the rack, then you have a hope of getting something, no matter how trivial, arguably effective it is, that argument aside, then you have a hope. But if you're constantly pushing down and pushing your butt up, it's just a it's just wasted effort.
Yeah, well, for me, when I think about the bench press and bar path, if you're viewing it from the side, right, and the bar gets forward your elbow, the bar is closer to, let's say, your feet than your elbow is at any point, you have exponentially increased the amount of work you have to do, and the odds of you missing that rep skyrocket as a result of that because now you have to do kind of almost a weird external rotation to get it back into place.
So we got a couple of different concepts. I want to toss something here as kind of a finisher. I treat leg drive training the same as I treat paused bench training, and let me explain. Pause bench training, a lot of times benchers might use that as a tool to increase the intensity of a bench press set. I would argue for the average lifter, one of the main benefits of doing a pause bench is to teach control and tightness. Because on a pause, that when you get it down there, you don't want to be getting loose, right? You want to learn to control it down, stay tight, and then press. So that's a huge reason to mess with pause benching. Now, I'm going to lump pause benching training into the same pool as leg drive training, and here's what I mean. If you are working on tightness, if you are working on leg drive, and the key word here is working, right? We are learning. We're not there yet. We don't have the confidence. We're not where we want to be. Don't try to turn every rep into a pause. Don't try to turn every rep into a leg drive. There's a couple ways. I'm going to tell you how I do it, and then Mark can share his thoughts. On warm-up sets, maybe work on the first 1 or 2 reps paused. Boom. Okay. Or maybe on a warm-up set, do the first 1 or 2 reps with leg drive. And then as you're building confidence, as you're building focus, as you're working on your technique during your warm-ups, you can start to do maybe more and more. But um, I don't want to distract you on your warm-ups from the point, which is warming up safely, tuning into the lift, making sure everything involved in the lift is feeling good for the day, making sure your technique is dialed in, your tightness is dialed in. But I think during a warm up, using the first rep for like leg drive and pause is a good time to practice. On your working sets, I would say you could do your first rep paused if you want to work on the pause, and then get on to the meat and potatoes of your set. Not everything has to be paused if you don't want. Same thing with leg drive. You could use that first rep leg drive, okay, and then we're just going to get on with the rest of our training because we're still working on things. These are just some options for those of you in process. So I know I rambled on a lot, Mark. Just want to hear your final thoughts on leg drive.
So you and I are actually very close in that regard. Something I like to do with the, let's call it the pause bench press, and we'll kind of use that interchangeably with the leg drive bench press, is depending on who my lifter is and what we're trying to get done for him, I like to do a bookend where the first and last rep of each set will use the pause and leg drive. Otherwise, if it's a power lifter, if I have a powerlifting athlete and let's say we're in the off season, I don't ever want them to lose their skill of the pause. So I might use their last rep of every set as the pause and leg drive. Reason being, I like the last one to be pause and leg drive is because that's going to be their most fatigued rep. So that way we're getting them used to that under a state of fatigue. So then when they're moving back to the more specific thing, the skill was developed in such a way that it's more automatic because, oh, I'm tired, which means I need to really focus on control and leg drive. But yeah, for most folks, I like the first and last rep, sometimes just the first if they are learning it. So you really hit the nail on the head there.
So I just want to end cap with this thought. Mark's approach of using the last rep, this is going to teach you to focus on consistency during your set. There's something that often happens on a bench press set, and that's a rate of decay. You start out really controlled, really focused, and then by rep 3, it's like, you're having a seizure. Legs are moving around, sliding around. You lose control. That's very common. I'm poking fun at it, but that's very common. So one of the things we want to work on is just rep consistency throughout a set. One final thing, remember, the base of powerlifting is power building. We have to build a base. So don't get caught up in the weeds. If you're sliding around, your legs are sliding around, you're getting loose, don't let that get in your head. At the end of the day, as long as you're training safely and you're adding reps or trying to train hard and adding reps over last time, don't worry about continue to refine as you move along. But always understand the point is to get strong. If you can get strong in a weak position where you don't have great leg drive, where you don't have the perfect control on your bench, where your feet are still dancing around a little bit, if you can get strong in that world, then that's a good base for everything else.
I believe there was this big, hairy, ugly dude. He once said, seek progress, not perfection.
Yeah, not perfection. All right, Mark, I appreciate you coming on. Where can they find you on the media that is very much social?
Yes. So on Instagram, it's Coach Mark Estrabio. On YouTube, Coach Mark Estrabio. And Facebook, it's still Amplified Training. But yeah, if you just, my last name, my name, Mark Estrabio. If you Google it, you're going to find me really fast.
All right, and I'll drop everything down below. Thank you, Mark, for joining me, and you guys have a great day.